challenging the gold standard of what a dream job should be, thinking long-term instead of paycheck to paycheck, and creating a two-way street with your organization. All on this episode of the Take Back Your Career podcast.
You need to take action, and you're about to get real-world information and insight for fixing your career. This is the Take Back Your Career podcast with your host, Adam Fullerton.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Take Back Your Career podcast, which is dedicated to helping professionals find happiness, fulfillment, and financial security in the work that you do so that you, of course, can avoid that feeling of misery, sense of being stuck, and dreading your workday every day you wake up. And we do this by having on real career coaches and experts who can provide actionable ideas which can help you produce real results in your career. And today we have on Anil Ram, who is the founder of Grad Coach, where he helps tackle the problem of careers for students through a different way. He does this by using technology and online learning, which enables students and graduates the power to manage their careers for life, which is extremely important. And Anil comes to us also with an extensive background, multiple years as a career consultant in the UK. And I know something I read about you, Anil, is that you did this because you worked on the company side, but you wanted to kind of switch teams, so to speak, and start helping people navigate their careers. So first and foremost, hey, thanks for being on this episode. I truly appreciate you doing this and taking the time out of your schedule to help our listeners take back their career. So like I like to say every single episode, welcome to the podcast and ask, hey, how's it going?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Adam. Thanks a lot for the opportunity, and hello, everyone. All good. Pretty cold in the UK and obviously in some form of lockdown. So aren't we all?
Well, this is, I like to say there's always a silver lining. And I think one of the biggest things that I've kind of taken from this whole lockdown or pandemic is one thing that I see a lot is people just doing self-reflection. And what we want to talk about, one of the topics we want to talk about today is just career exploration and kind of like figuring yourself out, figuring out your path, figuring out what you want to do and where you need to go and how to get there. And I think, again, with this lockdown, it's given people the opportunity to take a step back and think, okay, how much do I really like what I do? When I wake up, it's nice to roll out of bed, but even that novelty wears off. I should say roll out of bed and jump on the computer. But that again, the novelty, it wears off eventually because you still don't like what you do. So again, there's silver linings in this and that. People are able to reflect. They have more time than ever to remain home and think, is this really what I want to do? Is this what my life has culminated to wherever I am in my career journey? And so I guess I want to ask you, Anil, what do you think about that situation? What do you think people who are sitting there saying, I don't think this is for me, or I know it's not for me, what should we do for them? How would we help that type of listener assess their situation and kind of figure out where do they want to go and what do they want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point because I know there's a doom and gloom about coronavirus and the pandemic. And obviously we're trying to be sensitive to the topic because all of us have been deeply affected, but there have been some silver linings. And I think that's the one is, particularly myself, I used to travel a lot to London in my role. It's just, you kind of wake up, it's go, before you know it, it's Friday and you have other things going on, whether it's family, kids, friends, going out, gigs, etc. We never really have that opportunity to kind of sit down, reflect and think, are we happy or am I just doing this because I've got mortgages and bills and et cetera to pay and I have to fulfill a certain lifestyle, right? I think something I kind of realized that as well was in my first role, my first full-time role, I loved it. I was part of the big city. I was in London and I was expecting things to just fall into place. No one really talks to you about what is career fulfillment. Are you happy in doing what you do? Or is it, no, you got to go to the big city. You got to be in sort of, the big corporate sector and that's it. Like things get taken care of, but it's so far from the truth. And that is why I'm such an advocate of sort of career exploration and reflection on, hey, what do I actually like? Because previous to this new world of work and life, I really did enjoy working from home or having that flexibility, but actually there are some downsides to it. And many of us didn't think there were downsides to it. We just thought, great, we can just stroll out of bed, kind of meet friends the night before, have a bit of a boozy night, and it won't really kind of bite you in the next morning. But actually, all routine gets thrown out the window after a while. It's like, do I get changed? Do I not get changed? Do I really want to be on my laptop all day? So I guess if you're in that position of, what do I enjoy? A really good starting place is to journal. And I guess people have got different kind of thoughts about journaling. I just think the power of writing some of your thoughts down helps, because like me, and kind of thinking back to where I was at university and as a graduate, you have like a million things that you think about, and you think, and we're all impressionable at such a young age. And even throughout our lives, whatever we see, knowledge that we consume, it has an impact on us. So many of us, we do get sort of swayed by the shiny object syndrome of, great, wouldn't it be awesome to work for that global prestigious company? Even me, earlier in the year, I did see an opportunity on my LinkedIn profile of TikTok, and I was like, ooh, hello, this is interesting. It's booming. Everyone's talking about it. Wouldn't it be so cool to work for TikTok? And I was like, whoa, hold up a minute. You have got no interest in working for TikTok. Yeah, but imagine how cool it would be to tell my friends that I work for TikTok. And I think all of us get sucked into that environment. Or we look at a package and we think, whoa, I could pay off my student debt all in one go in a year. Or that company car looks really nice. Or those benefits look amazing. But I think the silver lining here of being affected by coronavirus from a work perspective is a lot of those kind of peripheral benefits aren't there anymore. So you're forced to really think, hey, do I actually enjoy what I do? Or what's the output of what I do? Who does it impact, and how does it impact people? And that is what you're left thinking is, I hate working in a team, or I love working in a team. And you really have to start digging a lot deeper in, is this for me? And if it's not for me, great, we have some data. How do we move that forward then? How do we start fine-tuning what our next step should look like?
Yeah, and I think one thing you talked about, just journaling in general, just whether you're writing it down or you're typing it, or it's just self-reflection, right? In general, it's sitting there and taking the time to say, all right, how do I feel? Let's kind of assess your situation. And are you being honest with yourself? Are you saying, I'm just doing this to look cool and impress others and have that nice house or the fancy car, but deep down inside, you're miserable, right? And that's, the keeping up with the Joneses sort of philosophy that we like to talk about on this podcast. And I think it's important, of course, for students, people that you work with, especially students and graduate students who are sitting there to what you said, thinking, oh, big company, big job, I'm going to work for TikTok or whoever it might be. Like, that's the gold standard, right? That's going to make sure that I'm the happiest and I'm doing the best. I'm the most successful. But what we know, I guess, or at least what I feel or I've experienced is that 5, 6, 7 years into my career, that's not the gold standard. Personally, I thought that's what I needed to do. And the more I did that and went down that path, the worse and more unhappy, more miserable, more stuck I felt in my career. So I think, again, it's just extremely important for our young listeners to realize that you might have a standard in your mind that maybe society or your friends have pushed on you, but it doesn't really mean it's the actual standard. Is that what you would say too?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, think about the pressures that are put on us from a career and life perspective. So many people think you need to go to college or university. You need to have settled down, be married, have a house by a certain age. You need to have found the job for you for the rest of your life after graduation. It just doesn't exist. There's people who pivot from career to in different ways. There are people who don't get married. There are people who are completely happy and successful in their own way. Success isn't defined what people think. It's how you define what success is, and also kind of you achieving it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I want to ask you then, if someone, let's talk to the young listener that's out there right now, someone who, again, maybe is in college and they're thinking or listening to this and thinking, well, okay, maybe I need to stop thinking of what everybody else thinks success is and start defining success myself. Or maybe this career path that I'm going down isn't really what I want it to be. How does someone of that age or that they're in that particular situation in their career, the early stages, so to speak, how do we help them gauge what makes sense for them? And first thing that came to my mind was like, hey, if you're in a certain industry or field, reach out to somebody. Maybe that's through LinkedIn or whatever it might be, your professor, who's someone who knows someone, and you can learn more about the industry, the field that you're chasing or going to go into, or jobs within that industry or field, and say, okay, is this really for me? Or at least, if you're going into marketing or whatever, maybe there's certain facets of marketing that you're just not interested in or you don't know about, and before trying to take that, job one where you're going to be in advertising, maybe advertising really isn't what you think it is. But how do you learn that? Again, my first thing I thought is reach out to those people, connect with those people, ask them, how is it? And then learn what you like and don't like, maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously if you're still at college and university, you're almost in a really positive position, right? Because your primary goal is your education. You're there for a degree. You're there to get something out of it. Everything else is a bonus until the day you graduate. Then your role shifts to welcome to the NFL, rookie. Like,
big
great.
kid world, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you paying bills? Are your parents on your back saying you have to contribute to the financial household? And again, we all have a societal pressures as well. So many of your friends have gone off to all aspects of the world and working. Who doesn't want to grab holidays? Who doesn't want to spend a bit more money on themselves? Like, you want to step up in the world. Yes. So take the opportunity that you have at the moment and invest in yourself. So ask those questions, be curious. So speak to your professors and academics, access your career services, but also reflect on yourself. What is it that your next step looks like? What are some of the interests that you have? So there's a good starting place. Then you can start leveraging different tools. So joining societies at college or university, doing your own personal projects, tapping into LinkedIn is definitely a must because it's free. There's so much power there. There's so much potential from a personal development perspective, but also a professional development perspective. You can gain access and taste different industries relatively easily through having conversations with experienced people. You can find mentors. You can get free advice and support. You can tap into alumni, which is, again, an incredibly hidden or underutilized tool. Is one of the questions that I get asked the most is, I don't like my degree anymore. What else can I do with my degree? It's like, well, you could ask me and I could give you my interpretation, but I'm pretty sure you'd rather see someone who's walked your shoes, who's walked the path that you're on, and they've now pivoted in a different way. So again, you can tap into alumni with 2 clicks. Go to your college on the left-hand side, you can see alumni, and then you can just manipulate everything there in terms of where people live, what they do now, when they graduated. And it's an easy relationship to build, right? Because you've got something in common with them. And then if you're brave enough and you feel comfortable enough, reach out to the big wide world of LinkedIn and ask anyone who you don't know questions that you think would be valuable, but also insightful for both parties.
Yeah, and that's one tool that I think I've used more than ever before in the last handful of months only. I've been an advocate of LinkedIn just because of the user that's on there is the professional person, and if they're on there, if they're on there and they're active, I mean, that's a professional in potentially a job or a career path or at a company that you might be interested in, and you can reach out to them and gain a whole lot of knowledge. This is something we talked about on a previous episode, but I mean, it's kind of an open book, right? And you want to make sure that you use that person or people or the alumni, whoever it might be, as that really free resource to kind of say, is this right for me? Is this wrong for me? And what am I getting myself into? And if all it's going to cost you is time, then I guess make it a priority, right? And find the time and devote the time to it and the energy to it, because that's going to save you a lot of hardship and headache potentially in the long run, especially as a young student or someone who just graduated and maybe someone who's just in their first job. And I like to say too that you talked about pivoting, but course correction is what I like to call it. If you start off, 1 degree changes now can produce 180 degree changes in the future, or at least stop 180 degree changes in the future. So I think it's important for young professionals more than anything to just say, like we talked about, don't worry about what success might look like from someone else or society, but figure out what you want to do and then figure out the resources out there that can help you achieve that and go down that path so that you don't have to do what I personally did, which is pivot. I don't want to say I did a 180, but change the path I was on. And that for me, just speaking, honestly and openly here, was extremely difficult because I personally didn't know where to go and what to do. And reaching out to alumni, I didn't even think about it. And maybe it's because I don't know, maybe it's because I'm dumb. I couldn't tell you, but I just didn't think about that. I didn't think about LinkedIn. And again, I just think it's a great platform for people to use and leverage to get that information.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, LinkedIn is for everyone. It's just more about what's your purpose. And I think, then you start going off down the topic of like building relationships and how you go about it. And nothing really changes as long as you have a strong why. And again, being reasonable with what you're asking. If it's just for information, it's almost like tasting. It's almost like, kind of the analogy I'll use is it's like going to a buffet. That's all you're trying to do is get a taste of everything rather than, go to a restaurant that specializes in a certain type of food and then just order it. And it's, a really fancy restaurant. And then if you don't like the food, you're kind of a bit stuck because you almost feel like I've spent, $300 on this meal and I don't like it. It's the same aspect of your career. Like what most people go and do is they see an opportunity, they apply to an opportunity, they spend hours, creating resumes and cover letters and applications, and then get rejected. Or they do get offered the role and then they come to that kind of realization that actually this wasn't what I was expecting. So why put in such a heavy investment and high risk when actually what you can do is find the people who are doing it or find the people who have got significant experience in an area. And I think that's one of the other issues that I face a lot with students and graduates, and obviously people that I've worked with in the past of CEOs as well, is pigeonholing themselves or seeing a job role and applying to it. And you ask them wider questions. Okay, so how would this fit into the rest of the company? But they couldn't tell you. Or they tell you that actually they haven't found similar roles at other companies. But actually job role and job terminology just differs from company to company. Everyone has their own language that they use, but they just haven't necessarily, it's not sort of common knowledge across all companies. So what I would say is start broad, think about breadth rather than depth. So if you are interested in marketing or consulting or finance, which are sort of, very popular areas, just think more broad level. Approach people who have got significant, decades of experience in these areas and find out that information, map out some of these areas and understand how different aspects of finance sort of complement each other. What is the difference between working for an investment bank versus an asset manager, for example, or in marketing? Marketing is so sexy, it's very in at the moment, but who wants to talk about PPC or SEO? Not many people. Or blogging or seeing the power of it. Everyone wants to talk about social media and influencer management, but that's only one small aspect. So I think it's really important to really think more sort of wider about industries, because we don't know what we don't know until we uncover it. So careers isn't one of those situations where you just kind of put your finger in the air and something comes to you. It's like, well, we all have a baseline knowledge, but it's your responsibility to go out there and discover what else belongs. And by doing that, or to do that, then simply find people who do it and ask them the questions that mean something to you. What are the things that you need from an employer? What are you passionate about? Is it work-life balance? Is it flexibility of work? Is it the type of work that interests you? Again, more and more people are interested in corporate social responsibility, the impact on the environment, the impact on the world. They want to make a positive impact. Great. Well, does this industry provide you with that? Or is it the opposite, for example? So it's really important to kind of test and discover and taste things by having those conversations. Then you're in a better position because you decrease the chance of it not working out for you later on. So you're almost kind of increasing the odds really for you in your favor of, great, I've had 10 conversations. I'm now much more knowledgeable about the area because I've got the inside knowledge. So therefore I have something that other candidates won't have necessarily. And again, not many candidates do reach out to potential employers and build those relationships. So it's a win-win because you get to direct that knowledge into your applications, and it can happen, you can be supported through the process, if not be offered a full-time opportunity or a part-time opportunity through building relationships.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important. I mean, what you just said, I think the fact that people try to just, again, they take the societal pressure of I have to go to this job or I have to go down this path, and they pigeonhole themselves. But I think what you said is that if you kind of take a step back and you think about what kind of position that you really want, what kind of job, what kind of career do you really want? What interests you? What motivates you? What industry excites you and something that's going to make you feel like, hey, I enjoy working, instead of just going after the next job that pops up. I think it's extremely powerful, and it allows people to set themselves up for success in the long term instead of just kind of skipping around from job 1 to job 2 to job 3, because really none of these ever hit on the things that were I guess, motivating factors or drivers for the person who's seeking that job. They just say, okay, I made more money, or this one's going to be for a cooler company, or this one's going to be closer to home, or whatever. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what is actually driving you and going to make you want to stay there. And I would say, at least from my conversations and what I've seen in the world, is that it's really just people just say, I hate what I do now. I'm going to go to this other job because it sounds better. But like you said earlier, like, well, why do you want to work here? What can you do for this organization? Why would you want to help this organization? Why would you want to even be in this role? And what can you ask the employer or the company for that's going to kind of, I like to say, put that circle peg into a circle hole instead of the square peg being shoved in there, which we know is only going to either, one, make you miserable and make you feel stuck and, just hate what you do, or it's going to become a good fit because you set yourself up with clear expectations between yourself and the employer, and hey, this is what I asked for and this is what they're going to deliver on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fundamental, right? Because if you remove those almost like, the blankets really of like the salary, the benefits. I mean, how difficult, and this is something that I thought at the start of my career was like, I'd look at a salary, think amazing, great. I can't wait for that to come into my account, but it's once every month. So what do you do for the other 30 days? So I think that's really important is prior to going into, starting my career, I just thought it was going to be super easy. Great, you just turn up, you do the hours, and then you wait for that paycheck to land in your account, and happy days.
Well, not to cut you off, but I will say, I just want to interject, that is absolutely a tactic some people can use and a lot of people use. Unfortunately, we know where this leads. Most times it's going to lead to, again, what this whole podcast is about. It's people who are stuck, who are afraid, who are just unsure on what to do, and they end up just hating what they do every single day. That is their tactic, though. It's not, and this is why I think, again, this podcast exists. It's to help bridge that gap between here's what you think you know and here's what you should know. And like you said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of people, me included, was like, hey, I'm just going to get this job, and this is just, I'm going to show up, I'm going to get the paycheck every 2 weeks over here's how we do it. But point is, you just show up and you show up and you show up and you do that day in, day out, and there's no real plan or strategy in place other than let's see where life gets us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've not met one person who's able to do that for a consistent period because, particularly when you start your career, you think you can because it's like, don't worry, 2 weeks, like it'll fly by. But actually it eats away at you every single day of like, this is actually mundane work. I don't enjoy it, or my boss is an ass, or my colleagues don't get on with me, or, you get negative experiences in what you do. So, but on the flip side, the pandemic has really made people or forced people to think about opportunities just for that paycheck. And that's absolutely fine. But if you are in that situation where needs must, and you have to gain work because of the situation you're in, you have to pay bills, etc., then the next best thing is don't just take any job, right? Like focus on some of your career and over a long view, right? So what is going to help you? Obviously, the best thing that can help you with your career pathway is doing something that's directly relevant. So again, similar role, similar organization, or being in that industry. Obviously, that may or may not happen. So then start focusing on, okay, well, there aren't any opportunities, or the industry that I'm in has been decimated and deeply impacted. So hospitality, retail, tourism, for example. Can I pursue another industry where actually the skills can really complement the industry that I want to pursue over a longer period? All for it, because at least you see something that you can anchor your why to, and it's more of a long term, because waiting 13 days and waiting for that 14th day of your paycheck is a longer period of time, particularly after it's come into your account and you've now got another 14 days to wait. But there is no really long-term view. There's no, why am I doing this? Apart from I've just got to pay the bills. Well, how are you advancing your career then?
Yeah, it's kind of the rat race is what, it's a common expression or phrase or term that everybody uses over here at least. And I think one thing I was going to say that you brought up is just investing into something that you believe. This is my personal take. I'm not a stock advisor whatsoever, but my personal take on like stocks and the stock market over here is that, I like to say invest into companies that you use and that you believe in. And that way, just like your career, if you believe in that company, if you use that company, or if you understand the why behind why that company exists and you invest yourself into that, you're only going to set yourself up for success and feel like you're part of a bigger goal, part of a bigger mission, and something that really does involve, or I guess is part of your life that instead of just, I guess my point is, instead of just joining a company that you really have no connection with and you have no interest in, you're just there for the job, right? That's just going to, again, set you up for failure very quickly. And once that novelty wears off, you're back to where you were, which is stage one or phase one, and looking for a way out. But that every 2 weeks you get that paycheck. That's what I feel like happens to a lot of people as well. They get that paycheck, and then that Friday they say, okay, it's the weekend, I got the paycheck, it's payday, things are going well. And then Monday morning it comes back and they say, damn, that it already wore off. And they just keep on doing that. So I want to ask you, for people, this is something I've been thinking about recently, but people that are introverts versus extroverts, people that are saying like, I really, because of this pandemic, I got to stay home. And I'm saying me personally, but people saying, I got to stay home. How does someone, and I don't have to talk to anybody, like I got to work with some people, but you know what? I like to just kind of do my own thing. How do you assess that situation? Or what would you say if you had someone who's sitting there saying, I just like to work from home and not be bothered? How do I approach a company with that sort of personality type and just say, I like to just be left alone and do my thing? Is that something I feel like most companies are going to say, well, we don't want that, we need a team builder. But I guess looking at someone's personality type, how do we help that type of person versus the person that says, I want to get back into the office?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a great question. And believe it or not, I'm a natural introvert. So that speaks to me volumes, because I am that type of person. My perfect environment is just give me a room, let me play my Spotify playlist, and just don't bother me. So it's more about what value you can bring and the leverage of that. Now, obviously, different industries, different organizations will have different roles. So if you're going to be outward facing and you have to be that extrovert personality, then obviously it's just not a compatible fit. But there are certain roles where you would need that quiet time. You would need to really be not distracted. It just depends on what you're looking for. And again, it's what's the value of that? Like, for example, we're now seeing, Zoom fatigue. Everyone's on Teams or Zoom or other equivalents. Is there really a need for it? Now, obviously, a lot more organizations are thinking more about mental health and well-being. I think it's a conversation that is being discussed a lot more, rather than, pre-COVID, people would just have meetings for meeting's sake, right?
I used to have meetings, like you said, and I would spend probably anywhere from half to 3/4 of my time in meetings. And if there was honestly, if there's anything that I hated more than the workday itself, was going into meetings to just basically talk in circles. It kind of felt like it was a party every single time. And as kind of an introvert myself, same. I was just like, oh my goodness, here we go again. More, I like to say it's not just an hour of your time. It's an hour multiplied by the number of people in that room. So if you have a meeting and there's 10 of you and you're being paid $100 an hour, do the math, you have to justify, or you should justify, the cost of that meeting, which I feel like most people don't. But anyway, that was me interjecting my quick thoughts on what you said. So sorry to cut you off.
No, I think it's a great point. I think just being open and transparent and creating not necessarily boundaries, but just sort of clear ways of communicating. And that's what's worked for me is, people want to know who you are. One thing that has really been open and, has really happened with businesses like professional development reviews, annual reviews, performance reviews. But why not take that further? Why not talk to your manager or talk to people who you work with and kind of create some boundaries of how you work or what your preferences are? Like, everyone has different preferences. I'm seeing a lot more organizations have like coffee mornings, perhaps, where people can just, spend 15 minutes to 30 minutes and just kind of have a cup of tea or coffee and just talk to one another on like a free open platform. So I think it's really important that now we're having that conversation of, look, if I am that introvert and you have found your target organizations, you can start to develop those conversations of, hey, this is me. This is my personality. I'm not that constantly outward facing extrovert all the time. I work in this particular way. And I think it's really important to be open and honest, because recruitment, the process of recruitment is very much like two parties selling themselves. And I think we often forget that. We always think that the employer has all the leverage, and it's like, not necessarily. Like, we have choice, which is a huge leverage, because don't forget, you're selling yourself, but the organization as well is selling themselves too. So you really have to be open and honest and kind of play that game as well of, yeah, we're both two parties selling themselves, but if I'm open and honest and authentic, and they are, and you can verify that through the questions that you can ask at the end of that interview, I think it's really important to use that time, use that energy to verify if this is the right opportunity for you. And if it's not, then you need to make that call of, look, again, if I am successful here, but it's not the right opportunity for me, how many months will I give myself before I'm fired or before I'm happy to walk away? I think that's really important, is bring all yourself to work. Otherwise, it's going to be a long time in between paycheck to paycheck.
Right. And like you said, it's just setting those expectations up front and making sure that when you have those interviews and those conversations, or, looking at different companies, that you are, again, setting yourself up for long-term success, because you're being open, you're being honest, and you're saying, this is just who I am and how I work. That doesn't mean I don't have the value or the skills to bring to the table, but from a personality perspective, we know personality is extremely important when it comes to working for an organization. It doesn't mean there's a right or wrong. It's just, what is the organization looking for, and does it align with who you are and the type of personality that you have? And like you said, it's kind of a two-way street. It's a bargain, or it's not a bargain, but it's you got to make it a mutually beneficial conversation where everybody says, okay, this is who you are, this is what we are, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Can you deliver on this? And, as long as you have the personality type that fits within the team, then it's going to be a good fit. And you have to sit there and assess, well, is that the type of personality that I have, or, the type of drive I have, or maybe it's the mission of the company? Are those, all those things, do they line up with who you are and what you're looking for? And if not, it's okay to walk away. I guess you could even take the job, but again, you're only going to enjoy that for so long before, again, you feel miserable. And I think one of the last things I wanted to bring up, at least for this podcast today, is that I think it's important for people to realize that their priorities shift as they age and they learn more and they grow. Their interests shift, their expectations shift, their skill level and knowledge, it all changes. And one thing that I felt like in the beginning of my career personally was that I don't want to say afraid, but I felt like I never knew that it was okay to just adjust what I thought or what I expected or what I wanted in my career. I always thought, well, I want everything. Of course, I want to be super successful, but I started saying, well, I'm not interested in this job. Am I doing something wrong? Am I sitting there saying, well, like, you've got a great position. Like, what are you thinking? Like, why would you even consider this to be bad? But I want to hear your thoughts as someone who goes through their career and their expectations shift. How do we help that person realize that's okay, and how can they do something with that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, because not many people talk about it. People think that once you get into your career, like, it's done, it takes care of itself, like, you're happy now. Not necessarily, because rarely do careers stay static, and that's a choice. Like, I've only met people of a certain generation who have stayed in one job for decades, like 40 years, 50 years. But that's fine. But I think that's because they've got other things going on in their life where the risk of change will disrupt their routine. So it might be they've got a house, they have mortgages, they have bills, they have dependents to focus on. So therefore, it's a lot more difficult to start pivoting or doing 180s or doing those marginal gains of change. So it's all down to you. Now, you can stay static and be happy in that career, and I suppose expect your organization to think that's okay. And I think, but what I'm seeing a lot more is organizations aren't okay with you just coasting along. Like, again, they are paying you. They want the most out of you for the minimum amount of payment they can give. And for your perspective as well, is you obviously want to do the opposite, right? You want to be paid, but also you don't want burnout either. So I think it's really important to focus on what is it that you want, because we get into that honeymoon period when we start a career. It's like, great, okay, we might suffer imposter syndrome. Then you overcome it and you think, cool, I can do this. But then there's going to be a point where what you do becomes just normal routine. You don't really have to push yourself mentally. And it's up to you to reflect, what's the next step for me? Is it management? Is it leadership? Is it running projects or managing projects? Is it coaching or training and developing others? Or I think I've kind of run my course here. I need a new, fresh challenge. Well, what's that challenge going to be? Now, could you do a complete 180 and shift industries and shift role? If you feel comfortable, why not? Or no, I think it's just kind of moving to the next level up, or another rung on the ladder. That's really everyone, each one of us is kind of internal role, like internal monologue of, okay, I'm reflecting on myself. What's the next step for me? And we all have that choice. It just depends on the circumstances you're in and kind of what factors are in your life, and obviously the stability of it for you to progress with that. That's where we are.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We know that change is constant, and that if you understand that change is constant, then you'll be able to, or should be able to, cope better with the fact that you or our listeners have simply grown out of a role or a path, and their needs, interests have changed. And like you said, it's up to you to determine if you're in the position to change your situation, or at least assess how quickly you're able to change your situation depending on the obligations you have. But again, I think it's important for our listeners to remember that you do have the power to change your situation in the path that you're on, no matter if you're a college student or 20 years into your career, unless you're looking forward to hating what you do each and every day. So, Anil, it looks like we covered everything on today's docket. So I wanted to, of course, quickly thank you for being on this episode, and give you the floor, of course, for a moment to let our listeners know where they can continue to hearing your perspective and learning from you, and connect with you, and even reach out to you for some help with their own career.
Yeah, no, really appreciate it. I hope you found the conversation insightful. If you want any more information from me, I regularly post on LinkedIn. So just follow me, just connect. I think there's only one of me out there. So definitely kind of search for my name. And I think life's too short. I think the last 12 to 15 months have shown that. So why bother chasing other people's dreams when you've got your own to chase?
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to make sure that your contact information and profile and all that are, in the show notes for this episode, because again, I think you'd be an invaluable resource for our listeners, and I highly recommend or encourage they follow you on LinkedIn and reach out to you with any questions they might have. So with that said, one more time, I wanted to say thank you to Anil for being on today's episode, and of course, thank you to our listeners for tuning in. I sincerely hope that these types of conversations can help you guys listening out there, and help you take back your career and help you make the change you're looking for in your path. And remember, like we talked about today, that it's okay to challenge the gold standard of what people around you think a job and a career should be, and that you need to begin thinking long-term about your career instead of struggling through the work week just to get another paycheck. Feel excited for the weekend and then return back to misery the following Monday. And also that you have to start approaching your job as a two-way street, and think of it as trying to build a mutually beneficial relationship. And that's something we talked about on the last episode as well, and that you do have the power, you do have a say, and you need to make sure whatever or wherever it is you choose to work, that the organization understands your needs just as much as you understand theirs. And if you can work on those together, you can build a career with an organization that makes you feel inspired and excited to wake up and work and help them grow the business. So that again is just a few of the tidbits from today's episode, guys. I again appreciate you tuning in, and Anil for being on today's episode. And I think that's really it for today's episode. So as always, thanks for tuning in, guys. And I will catch you next Monday when we release an all new episode of the Take Back Your Career podcast. I'll catch you guys then. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Take Back Your Career podcast with your host, Adam Fullerton. the podcast dedicated to giving you expert advice and actionable ideas so that you can achieve real results and finally take back your career. Like what you heard in today's episode? Consider leaving a 5-star review and visiting takebackyourcareerpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify for more episodes. And remember, Mondays shouldn't suck, and neither should finding help. Thanks for listening to Take Back Your Career Podcast.